Hi everyone. I'm going to show you how to get started with the first homework assignment using GitHub Classroom. So the starting point for any of the assignments in this course is my web page, and then up in the upper left hand corner there'll be a link to the particular course, so CIS 371 in this case, and you should be able to see the assignment list down here. Or I think more students get to assignments through the timeline. Again, a link here in the upper left, and you can see the link to the web server in the milestones column. Once you're on the website for a particular assignment, what you're looking for is a GitHub Classroom URL. I'll tend to put it near the top of the page like I have here. And so when you click on that link, if you're not logged into GitHub, the first thing it'll do is ask you to log into GitHub. And then if you haven't used GitHub Classroom before, GitHub is going to ask your permission to interact with that separate application. So you just click on the green Authorize button down here. And because this assignment can be done in pairs, you'll eventually end up on this page here asking you to create a team name. So I'll call this team Web Server Demo, for lack of something better. So I'll create the team. So if you're the second person on your team to follow that link, you'll also have the choice of selecting from an existing team. And then the next step is to accept the assignment. By clicking this button, you're telling GitHub to create a repo for your team and then populate that repo with any starter code. Creating and configuring that repo takes a few seconds up to a few minutes. Most of the time it's just a few seconds, so if I hit refresh, we see that the new repo is ready to go. Look at the repo's URL here and notice a couple of things. First, your repository is owned by the 371 organization. It's not owned by you. That's the convention that GitHub has adopted so that it's easy for me to see a list of all the repos and have the proper access to the repos so I can help you as you're working on it and then grade them later. Also notice the name of the repo is automatically generated. It's the assignment name, static web server, followed by your team name. So if we follow this link, it takes you to the GitHub page for your repo for this assignment. The next step is to clone this repo so you can work with it locally. In the long run, the most convenient way to do this is to have a public-private key pair and have your public SSH key already loaded into GitHub. A separate video showing you how to do that. And so if you've done that, you want to choose the SSH URL here, copy that to your clipboard, go over to the terminal and do a git clone. So now if I move into that directory, I have my starter code. Now for most of the demos this semester, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. You're welcome to use whatever IDE you prefer, or even no IDE at all if you prefer things like Vim and Emacs. So if you're using VS Code, what you want to do is go to File, Open Folder, and then navigate to the folder you just cloned. And let me do a quick tour here. The .github directory is what's used to run the automated tests at GitHub, so there isn't anything in there you should be messing around with. The student data directory contains some files that you can use to test your web server locally. You've got an HTML file, you can ask for a PDF file, some pictures, some more HTML files. Feel free to do whatever you want with this directory to better test your code. This Java file is pretty much identical to the sample code that's out there. It provides a couple of examples of how to set up the sockets and the buffered readers and so on so that you can send and receive data from the web client. You're welcome to do whatever you want with this. You can start from here and add to it. You can write your own server from scratch. You can change languages, whatever works for you. Now I've provided a makefile that will just work if you're using Java. So the makefile is set up to compile that Java file, and it's also set up to launch that server in a certain directory and then run some unit tests. If you do anything other than build your web server in that Java file, you'll have to make some changes to the makefile. Especially if you decide to do your project in Python or something like that, you'll have to change the part of the makefile to launch that server. Every source code file you write and submit to me should have your name in it. I can grade things much more efficiently if your real names are in every file. Especially for team projects where the team name changes for every assignment, having your real names in these files is much easier than going back and looking to see who owns the team and then trying to remember which student has which cute GitHub name and so on. So please put your real name at the top of every file. In fact, one of the things I did in the make file was I put a grep statement in there that will fail if your name isn't in there. So if you go to build your code and it's failing for some strange reason, it could be failing because you forgot to put your name in there. All right. And then finally, you do need a written test plan. I am a big proponent of what's called test-driven development. That's the idea that you write your tests before you write your code, and then you add code until your tests pass. Now, I'm not going to make you have fully automated tests. That would be a little too time-consuming for this first homework assignment, but I do want to know that you've been thoughtful about what you're going to ask your server to do so that you know that it works. And one of the key benefits of doing that before you write your code is that by the time you're writing your code, you've already gone through a mental checklist of everything it needs to do so that you're not getting to the end and saying, oh, I forgot, and then stuffing some feature into the code you've already written. You're able to get all those features in there in a much more natural and organized way. All right, so now let's say you've written your test plan and you've written your code and you want to see if it works. Then what I like to do is use the terminal right inside of VS Code. And assuming you're using the Java file I provided as starter code, all you have to do to compile it is type make. Notice here that make failed, right? Because it says please put your name in the source files. So I'll change that and put my name in here. Now if I type make, it compiles. And then to test it out, I can run it. So I'm going to change into the student data directory because that's where all the files I might want to serve are. And then I'll launch the server, but that server file is in the directory above me. So now that server is waiting on port 8534 for a connection. So I'll go to my favorite web browser and make a connection to localhost on that port 8534. Notice that I'm making an HTTP connection, not an HTTPS connection. Setting up a server with the correct certificates to handle a secure connection is way more complicated than we want to do in week 1. That's an HTTP connection to localhost 8534, and I'm going to ask specifically for index.html. And when I do that, I get an error because I missed the period. So we'll put the period in there so it lines up with the file name, and I get that very simple web page that is here in student data. All right, so now let's say you've completed your web server, you've run all your tests, you're confident that the web server will pass the automated tests. What you do is you commit and push it back to GitHub. So typically you want to run your git commands from the root of your project, which is the directory with the name of your repo. And then there's 3 commands, git add dot. That will stage all the files in your project that have changed to be committed. And then git commit is a separate command, and you'll want to provide a commit message. And then finally a git push will send it back up to the cloud. And then when you've done that and you want to run your test, you come back to the web page for your project. If I do a refresh here, should see that there are now 2 commits. The initial commit was made by GitHub when it set up the repo for you, and I just now made that second commit. Come to the Actions tab here in the middle. And then under the blue All Workflows tab here, just left of center, you'll see the name of the test. Here it's called Web Server Check. Click on that. Then go over to the right to the drop down where it says Run Workflow. Make sure that the correct branch is selected. For these smaller projects, it'll probably just be master. And then click the green Run Workflow button. Now it'll take a while. Your tests could be queued for up to a minute until you see them in progress. That's what the little yellow spinning dot means. And then when they finish, you'll either get a green check if they all pass, or in this case, we got a red X. Of course, we got a red X here because I didn't actually finish the project. Now, the vast majority of the time when you get that red X, it means you have a bug in your code, which also means that you're missing a test. If you weren't missing a test, you'd know you'd have a bug. So what you do is you find the missing test, you find a failing test case, and then go back and fix it and run it again. Occasionally, you'll get failures caused by glitches on the back end. Maybe a server's down, or maybe a network connection got dropped. So if you think this is happening, you can click on Web Server Check here and click on the Run Instructor Test down here, and you can see the different stages and see what's failing. So if we look down from the top, we can see the auto tester do the checkout and then run the make and see that the make passed and so on. And you can see where that red X came in. And in this case, there are failing tests. So here we have the output of the server. I have a bunch of stuff going to standard output. And then here's the JUnit output that tells us, for example, because the project wasn't complete, it was returning text HTML when the web server should have been recognizing it was returning a GIF. So there's obviously more work to be done there. When you do get that green check, meaning all the tests have passed, and you've done any other ancillary parts of the assignment, like making sure your code's cleaned up and making sure it works with an actual browser and so on, then you want to do one more commit with a commit message that signals to me that you're ready for it to be graded. The convention I've adopted is that your commit message looks something like this. It has the string grade me in it. You can have other things in here, but when I see that grade me, then I know you're ready for it to be graded. All right, so I hope that this helps you get started and helps you use that GitHub Classroom tool smoothly. If you have any problems, of course, let me know and we'll take a look.